I'm very excited because the BOMA International Annual Conference is bringing a powerhouse keynote speaker, Hall of Fame speaker, best-selling author, and executive coach, Dan Thurmon. Known for his high energy, transformative insights, Dan was going to show us how to harness positive chaos to thrive in uncertainty, lead with confidence, and turn disruption into opportunity. Before he takes the main stage, I'm sitting down with him for a sneak peek of what's in store. So don't miss the chance to hear from one of the most dynamic thought leaders in business. Go to BOMA.org and register now for BOMA 2025. Dan, thank you so much for being here.
It's wonderful to see you, Mary Lou, and I can't wait for this opportunity to be with your BOMA community. This is going to be great.
It is. And I have several questions for you, as you know. The first question is your first book, Off Balance on Purpose. It really challenges the idea that achieving perfect balance is the key to success. Instead, life is inherently off balance, and the key to thriving is learning to be intentional in the imbalance. When we think about property owners and managers, they juggle a 24/7 business. They're often managing emergencies, tight budgets, natural disasters, demanding tenants. How can leaders and teams apply that off balance on purpose philosophy to prevent burnout while staying engaged and productive?
Well, there's a lot to that question. That is a great question. First of all, let's get to the premise of the book, because I wrote this book because I noticed that there was a really ineffectual conversation happening in the corporate environment across many industries, not just in commercial real estate. But it was, yes, life is important to us and we want our people to achieve work-life balance. And my thought was, well, what does that mean even? And what do you mean work-life balance? That implies work isn't even technically a part of your life, right? It's something else, which we know not to be true. It's where we spend the majority of our waking hours. And is balance something you ever really can or want to achieve? And after working through this and talking with a lot of successful leaders and individuals who've just achieved greatness in the world, and also, by the way, have amazing lives, the reality is balance is never something you get. It's never something you achieve. Balance is what you do. And it's the art of observing your situation, being aware, so increasing your awareness, and then enabling yourself and your team to make adjustments quicker rather than later, so you don't have to overcompensate. And it's often the little things that bring you back into a greater sense of alignment. So what I do in this book is try to help people connect their work, their professional identity to their relationships, their health, their spirit, their passions, so that we can unlock more of that creative capacity to contribute and also to sustain what is always going to be a very, difficult journey. Now, in commercial real estate and in property leadership, what you're dealing with, as you mentioned, is just day-to-day uncertainty. Day-to-day, you never know what you're going to get. You have your plan, you have your idea of what you want the day to be like, but then you're always responding to demands for your time and your attention and decision making and emergencies and employee issues of who didn't show up today or who did show up but they're bringing something that you don't even need on property, right? So it's like what are you going to do? And the principles involve a point of focus, right? So you have to be very clear on what's important, the overarching key principle. So what is the highest thing that has to happen in order for today to be successful? Obviously, you need to keep people safe. You need to keep the property functioning. You need to honor your commitments. There's a lot of other things. I'm just, suggesting a few, but that will help you discern the distractions from the necessities. And then you also need this skill to be able to, when you deal with the distraction, when something does pull you into the weeds, how do you get back to that point of focus and once again become very deliberate? And so what I try to illustrate is this concept of alignment. There's a difference between being unbalanced, right, which is not what you want. That's distracted. That's like completely out of sorts in your life and in your work, and being deliberately, intentionally off balance. It means you have a sense of alignment, integrity, congruence with your principles and your values. You know what's going on, but you're making a deliberate decision to lean in off balance on purpose means two things, right? Connected to your sense of meaning and mission for your business, for your culture, for your values, all of that. And then you're bringing that into that moment by saying, look, nothing changes unless I first take action. So I'm leaning in.
I really like the connection between off balance on purpose and positive chaos. It seems to really flow your first book to your second book. One of the common themes in there is really liberating in that we make choices, we own our decisions, we own our choices, right? And it kind of frees us up to move forward. In Positive Chaos, your second book, you talk about discerning uncertainty from randomness and using personal strengths to navigate the chaotic situations. The way you navigated COVID, I thought was such a great demonstration of this, because as a professional speaker, you had a thriving business that in March 2020, like went from thriving to nothing, right? And we saw a lot of panic in that market. And the way you handled it, I thought was really inspiring. Can you talk a little bit about that and maybe give us a little bit of a preview and some of the thoughts that went behind that?
And everyone should know, Mary Lou and I know each other really well because during the time of her tenure at the National Speakers Association, I was first on the board and then eventually the president of the association. Your first full year as NSA CEO, where I was NSA president. So we worked hand in hand through a lot of really important work. Like we got 3 years of work done in a year, according to you, in terms of getting the values right and the mission vision and how we can help our members and really redefine this association into the uncertainty. But then COVID hit, right? And COVID didn't just disrupt my business; it disrupted everybody's business. And what you happen to see among the world of leaders and speakers were, first of all the live events fell off the calendar. Everybody remembers this very, very clearly. And so there was no longer the model where you could go meet people in person. Secondly, there was the reality that people really needed our help and needed our message, but no one really knew how this was going to unfold. And so you had this duality where some speakers were racing to get to the microphone to talk about how they thought it was going to unfold. And it rang very hollow to me because you could just tell they don't know what they're talking about. Nobody knows the answers to what's going to happen because so much of the environment is completely out of our control. We remember this. We all remember this feeling of helplessness. We lived through it, and it was a defining period for our lives and for our professional identities and businesses. And some people thrived during that, and others were completely challenged. What we decided to do is, first of all, we checked in on all our clients. We were gracious about how we handled the existing bookings. And we formed a policy to say, look, whenever you're ready, we're going to take care of this date. In the meantime, how can we help you? And then second thing we did is we completely pivoted. I had never done a webinar. I'd never done an online event ever. And because in my mind, I'm a performer. There's a physical aspect to what I do. It's very engaging and entertaining, but also, I just love audiences. I love being in front of people and picking up on their energy. But what we did is we just basically took some time to go inward, and we built out a physical space into a digital broadcasting studio. And just to kind of give you and your viewers a look around. So thinking about the way people receive information, we thought of three concepts: your mind, your body, and your spirit. And what if we had three different rooms where we could effectuate learning from those different angles? And so, for example, this space is the action room where I could be up and moving physically. We have multiple camera angles because there's times in my presentation I do use physical disciplines to talk about focus and managing complexity and patterns and balance. I actually, do a handstand on the lectern, which is
Yes, you
pretty
do.
crazy.
You gave our meeting planner a heart attack the first time.
Oh, that's
But
true.
you're
That's
so
true.
good at that.
Well,
Yes.
maybe
You know
we'll
what
just
you're
say,
doing.
rather than show you that now, maybe we'll just say you got to register and sign up for BOMA to come see that one, right?
Yes.
But so this is the physical space where my physical energy can impact the audience in a different way. And then we had also the classroom. And the classroom again is a little two-camera setup, boom, where we got a classroom clock. We've got the board on the wall where we can take people through models of what we're talking about. We can talk about, what is the difference between uncertainty and randomness? To your
Mhm.
question, we are all dealing with more question marks right now than ever before. And there's a very specific reason for that. We are in a period of chaos as human beings. And I don't mean that to frighten you, because when you hear that word constantly, it's like usually intended to freak you out. Life is
Mhm.
chaotic. We never know what's going to come. The chaos of the economy or the labor market or the political environment and regulations and all these things that are. But basically, from a scientific perspective, chaos just defines a system that has so much openness, connectedness, and potential options of possibilities in terms of where things can go, that the the predictability horizon is so short that we can't really project what's coming. It's uncertain. But I see that as just kind of unfolding, right? Things that are just unfolding and unknowable at this moment, right? The randomness are things that are completely out of control and based on probability. So again, from a mathematical point of view, and by the way, randomness can work to your advantage as much as it can work to your detriment. So instead
Mhm.
of just looking at randomness as, oh my gosh, it's another threat, you should be thinking about things that are random that come up in your life as clues, as opportunities, as signals to say, hey, I'm going to lean into what I know. And then we can create more certainty by by controlling what we can control. And so for the studio space, for me, it was like, look, I have no idea how this is going to play out or how long it's going to take. But one thing I can know for certain is on the other side of it, I'm going to be in a better space. And I'm
Mhm.
going to have this productive project for myself and for my team to go through that keeps us oriented on helping people. And what happened was in the world of the professional speaking community is this studio and that approach became sort of I would
It
say an
became a model.
inspiration. What?
It
It was a
became a
model?
model. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, and a lot of people looked at it, but it also enabled me to essentially get ahead of some of my competitors. Not that I was trying to do that in a way, but to become a leader in a way that I had never been a leader before, right?
Well,
So
the
it
other
was
thing that
fun.
I think is really fascinating is, and this is a completely normal reaction, right? Like in the speaking industry, we saw people, their approach was, I'm going to do what I've always done, but now I'm just going to use this technology. So they literally put a camera and were lecturing to the camera. And that speaks to our natural inclination to do what we're comfortable with, right? Instead of doing like what you did, taking a step back and saying, okay, this is a whole new dynamic. How can I approach it completely different and really leverage the benefits of this emerging technology? How can I see the positives in this crazy, scary time, right? The other thing that I think is
And by the
really,
way, and
yeah,
also enjoy the ride,
yeah.
right? So this is the thing. Like, and one of the ways I put it is, imagine if you couldn't enjoy a movie or a great book unless you knew the ending in advance, right?
Mhm.
No, you don't want to know the ending. You're along for the ride. And so when you're living through uncertainty, it takes a leap of faith, but it also takes an open heart to say let me help orchestrate this, but then also just experience it because that's the reality. You're both the
Mhm.
co-creator and the central character of that story that's unfolding in your life.
And you have to be open to it. May not be perfect, but you'll figure out what's not working and adjust, right? Life's just constant adjustments. The other,
That's
the,
it.
the other thing that I thought was really cool and really applicable to our audience. So we talk about, for us right now, there's a lot of uncertainty and volatility, and there usually is in commercial real estate, right? But right now it's pretty uncertain time, specifically, particularly for Class B and C office. One of the things that we talk about though is um, COVID didn't create this decline in B and C, it accelerated it. So if you go on the internet and you Google and you look for pictures of the office from 1920 and look at pictures of the office in 2020, key elements of the office have remained the
Mhm.
same. How we've worked has fundamentally shifted, but we've got key elements that are stagnant. So anything from office attire to the mailroom layout to the cubicle layout. So office was overdue for disruption. And I think we have an opportunity to take a step back and look at how we use space and technology different. What you just demonstrated with 3 different setups that were very purposeful and intentional, it seems we could do the same thing in office. For example, a worker might need a place to focus one day, a place to meet with the team the next day, a place to have like a cup of coffee for some social things. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, sure. I mean, that takes it. It's not even a very. It's not a earth-shattering concept in office space because
Mhm.
hoteling has been around, as you know, for a long time. This idea that you can be mobile and park yourself wherever you need to be on a given day. But I think it's very much a reality. I understand these are big bets when you design a building and when you take those risks. But again, think about leadership and think about what the future of the workplace will look like. Another great friend of ours, Dan Burris, talks about he's a futurist and just brilliant. And if you don't follow Dan, you really should, because his methodology helps you separate hard trends from soft trends. Hard
Mhm.
trends are changes that we can know for certain are actually happening in the world. For instance, labor will continue to be a ever tightening market. We're going to need certain skills. We're going to need expertise in technology. AI will be a critical component of how everyone works in the future. So that's going to be a part of the workspace as well. Versus soft trends, which are the things that may happen or they might not. And by the way, if you have a preference in terms of whether they should or they shouldn't, that's where you can exert some influence. But we can design for certainty and with confidence about the things that we can know undoubtedly are going to happen. And the sooner you know that and go there with commitment and with authority, the sooner you demonstrate your leadership, and the more you create distance around those who you're competing with who aren't making that same move.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I would echo following Dan Burris. He is, he's been around for a long time. He is a leader in identifying hard and soft trends. One of the biggest industry challenges that we're facing is attracting, developing, and retaining top talent. So you
Mhm.
just hit on it. What I found fascinating as part of your book, Positive Chaos, you did this study, and you found that 81% of employees believe that handling chaos well should be a requirement for leaders, not a nice to have, a requirement. But what's
Mhm.
fascinating is your research also found that over 70% of workers would rather take a 10% pay cut and work for a boss who manages chaos well than make 10% more working for a boss who doesn't.
Yeah, that was shocking to me as well. And there was a lot about this study that really surprised me, but was from the way it was conducted scientifically, it was unarguable that it was valid. For instance, 1 out of every 4 working Americans thinks about quitting at least once every day, right? That's another example from this. But it really speaks. The statistics you talked about really speak to the fact that people need to feel some sense of comfort. They need to feel like their future has some stability, right? And so when we have lived through periods that have been so unstable, you don't realize the toll that it takes on you and your mental and physical well-being. And that trickles to the people in your life who you touch and influence. And then you see the effects on them and what they're dealing with in their chaotic worlds. And so it's absolutely, it tells us a lot. The people want us to exhibit the qualities of a leader who can function well and sometimes thrive in the
Mhm.
world of chaos. And we all know people who are like this, who just find a sense of calm when everybody else is freaking out, or who can hold back from contributing an opinion until things are more clear. Those are all examples, but there are some great qualities of leaders I can share that I think would be useful.
That would be perfect. So
Yeah. So
that was my
so
next
by the way,
question. What are
this
qualities and
study,
mindsets?
yeah, this study, and we're going to redo this study refresh it and to get some comparison statistics. But this report's from 2023. And so again, after having lived through chaos, but the characteristics of a leader that can handle chaos well, communication, communicates clearly. And so this is involved and this is really important. And we saw this during COVID of leaders who, even though where we were going, it wasn't completely known, they kept people informed. Here's what we're learning along the way. Here's what's happening now. This is what we're doing next. Constant communication. And during chaos, you simply can't over communicate. You don't want to really project your fears and your own uncertainties. That would be destabilizing. But to the degree that you can tell people what's going on, that'll always be helpful. Willing and able to adapt and adjust quickly. So decision making, right? So I see that this isn't working, so we're going to stop it. And we're going to recognize we may need to change things a time or two or three before we get to the ultimate goal. But that's okay, because we recognize this process is going to be messy. But if we don't start going through the process, we're not going to get to the end result. Quickly solving problems and making important decisions. That kind of goes in, and I just kind of covered that as well. Being honest and candid, being well prepared, right? So notice we get all the way down this list and we haven't really even covered the fact that they're right. Like, you don't even have to always be right all the time. But if you're honest, if you're willing, if you're candid, if you're communicating, they see you as a part of this process that they can trust, because you're willing to take on more of the burden of responsibility and lead them. And you genuinely care enough to communicate and to listen. This study and all of the insights from it, Stephanie's going to pull this up on our screen here. So this is the impact of chaos on the American workforce. That URL code will take you to download this absolutely free. Just please check it out if this could be useful to you.
Yeah, I thought that was such an impactful study. And I love how you wrapped it into the book and used the findings to come up with real key actionable steps that we can take, right? One of the things that you've talked a lot about is that the employer-employee relationship has significantly changed. So, for example, you've said if a job isn't a net positive in someone's life, their willingness becomes extremely limited and they won't likely be with you long. So I have a two-part question on that. How do leaders need to evolve to attract and retain talent? And then on the flip side, what are some mindset shifts that employees need to make in return?
Okay, so the way I address this in the book, and I haven't read this recently, but it's talking about the employer-employee contract, and not just an employment contract, but just the implied psychological agreement that goes on with when you say to someone, "I will work for you," right? There's a lot of, the contract used to be, when you work for me, I get you in the office for 8 hours. I get, you basically, you're not going to talk about your personal life. You're not going to make any personal calls. It's like, we're not going to even go there because you're mine and I own you during this period of time. And we want you to be a contributor to our team and all the objectives that I put out in front of you. And there's a case that you could be made. It's like, yeah, that's what you're paying for. That's what the money's for, is to make them incentivized. However, the reality is, people are just so much more aware and protective of the quality of their life, the quality of their health, their relationships, their personal passions and pursuits. And it's generational, but it's also a function of our world now and the interconnected nature of everything. And so I believe that that as an employment, as a culture, you have to also be committed to helping people improve. Because if you being a part of our team over time builds resentment and makes you increasingly conflicted about the other aspects of your life that are important, then that's going to pull from your ability to contribute. So there's that, and I can take you through a model on that really quickly. Or we can also talk about the employee's mindset, which must be ownership. You alluded to this in the beginning. All right, you're giving me this responsibility, and by the way, I'm going to ask for some freedoms in terms of how I deliver to those to those requirements and demands. So that means I totally own the outcomes. I totally own the results. I totally own the mistakes along the way, and I'll do it whatever I can to make up for it. And if all of that exists in this umbrella of a culture that is honest and clear and has some other aspect that's purposeful. And what I mean is like, it's a net good for humanity. It's a net good for the people who are here. Then people will feel like, all right, I'm along for the ride.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. I think I see a lot of companies and individual leaders struggle to make that shift from managing activities to really managing outcomes. And to your point, we want people to be accountable. But if we say, Dan, I want you to be accountable, but you're going to hit this result, and this is exactly the steps you're going to take and how you're going to do it, I can't hold you accountable because you're not able to make the decisions to achieve that result, right? And it is a tough shift, especially like you're not going to see them working in the office 40 hours a week. But if they're achieving the goals that you've set out for them, that's really what's important. And
And
employees,
communication, by the way, is really important there
yes.
in terms of it going both ways. Because when
Yeah.
you don't see someone who works for you, the
Mhm.
temptation is to start writing another story that, oh, what are they doing? They're slacking off. They're probably on a beach somewhere. So the communication of here's what I worked on today. Here's how things are going, and building that trust over time is absolutely essential.
Which, obviously, I believe the office plays a critical role in building that trust and establishing that culture. To your point, we have to be very clear about the culture we're creating. We have to be very clear about the outcomes that we expect from each individual. But employees, they want the freedom. They want to take on that ownership. But you have to give them the authority, commensurate with the ownership that you want to hold them accountable for.
Yeah. Yeah, and the office is essential. Like
Yes.
let's get clear on that. We
Yeah.
need to make the office the place where we are most connected, where we are most productive, and where people want to be, you know?
Mhm.
So what that's the question is, what does that look like? Because hard trend for certain that will come under increased certainty over time. Do I want to be with these people in this place for the vast majority of my waking life?
Absolutely. And I think hybrid is here to stay. I think there will be some and it's market and industry specific, right? There'll be some people that go back to the office 5 days a week. But I think how do we adapt to a new hybrid uh working environment, which frankly I find more tricky than all virtual or all in person. So to me,
Hmm.
we've got to start thinking about what's the purpose of the office and how do we create those spaces that reinforce the culture we're trying to create. And to your point, really connect people to each other, to the work that they're doing, and to the company as a whole. What are your thoughts on office and the future of office?
Hmm. Well, I think it's exciting. Again, I think COVID and the virtual gap reset everybody's expectations. And for a lot of them who had been in the working environment for a long time or in the workplace professionally, it made them acutely aware of what they have been sacrificing, you know,
Mhm.
in terms of commute time, travel time, just the the opportunity to do things with the people that they loved. Again, I'm not making an argument that you should give everyone everything they need, but I think the future of the office, and again, this is not my expertise, but I would say uh, obviously technology is a critical component where
Mhm.
people can feel plugged in at the best level. They feel inspired, they feel equipped, they have opportunities to improve themselves in their workplace, whether that could be a gym or things like this
Mhm.
that give them an opportunity to take breaks and accomplish the things that they might have been used to. you know how do they eat healthy at the office? How do they how do they create collaborations in a great way with the people around them so that they look forward to that. And I would say you want to design the office space in a way that you want people to miss it when they're not there. Like, what if we
Yes, I
completely
love that.
flipped it? What if we
Mhm.
completely flipped the psychology instead of saying, oh, we just want people to be able to get here and we're going to hold them accountable to be here. No, when they're not here and when they're working from home, we're going to want them thinking, gosh, I can't wait to get back to the office. What would that look like?
That is a awesome answer. And I agree with you. That would be amazing to get to that point. So, kind of flipping a little bit with the rapid advancements in AI, sustainability, flexible workspaces, the role of property management is continually evolving. So, what skills or mindsets should today's leaders and today's property managers develop to stay ahead and to future proof their careers in commercial real estate?
Well, always interpersonal communication skills. Um, you can't go wrong with that because that's the gap, right? So we've just hit this bubble where that whole period has been disrupted, and so there's a lot of people who never got the exposure to being able to um,
Mhm.
interface with human beings one on one and in person. That never goes away, by the way. However good AI gets, there will never be a substitute for this BOMA conference, for the
Mhm.
opportunity to get together, to hear speakers on stage and talk to people in the hallway, and just humans connecting with each other, sharing their experience, their passions, their frustrations, their hope, their ideas. Um, so that's the reality, and that's what COVID taught us. Is like you can't just do away with that. You know, people were so hungry to get back to it. Um, I would also say speaking. Being on stage in front of others and being comfortable in that environment, either on camera or in front of a room. Um, yes, it's one of the biggest fears. It's also one of the fastest ways to multiply your impact and thus multiply your value for an organization. And so it's quite often the people who are the most effective communicators who rise up to the C-suite. It's not always the smartest people. It's not always
Yeah.
the most experienced people. It's the best communicators.
Well, Dan, this has been an incredible conversation, and I cannot wait to see you on main stage. Thank you so much for your time and for joining us today.
I love it. And I can't wait to see you all there.